pregnant mother bear got stuck in the chains in the forest. What this human baby did put everyone in tears. Let us know where you're watching from. The morning sun broke through the thick trees, casting spotted light on the forest floor. Little Noah Parker, just 15 months old, played with wooden blocks on the porch of his family's cabin. His mother, Olivia, hung laundry nearby, glancing at her son between each piece. The cabin stood at the edge of Whispering Pines Forest, where they had moved just 3 months ago to escape the city life. Noah's tiny hands stacked one block on top of another, his blue eyes focused with the determination only a toddler could muster for such a simple task. The breeze carried the scent of pine and something else, something wild. Noah looked up, distracted by a sound he had never heard before. A deep, pained moan echoed from the trees beyond their yard. Olivia didn't notice the sound at first, too busy with her chore and thoughts of the dinner she needed to prepare, before her husband Marcus returned from the nearby town with supplies. Their cabin had no close neighbors, just miles of ancient forest surrounding them. Marcus had warned her to keep Noah close. Bears had been spotted in these woods. The sound came again, louder this time. A desperate cry that made Noah drop his block and turn his head toward the forest edge, just 50 yards from where he sat. Something about that cry tugged at Noah's heart in a way his young mind couldn't understand. It wasn't scary, it was sad, so very sad. While Olivia stepped inside to grab more clothespins, Noah pushed himself up on wobbly legs. His eyes never left the spot where the trees grew thick, where shadows danced between trunks. The cry came again, weaker this time, like someone losing hope. Noah took one uncertain step, then another, moving away from the safety of the porch. The forest edge seemed to call to him, and Noah followed without fear. His small feet padded across the soft grass of their yard. Behind him, the screen door slammed as Olivia returned to her laundry, not yet noticing her son's journey toward the unknown. Noah reached the first line of trees just as another moan broke the silence. This time, he could see movement in the shadows, something large and dark thrashing weakly. With each step, the toddler moved deeper into the forest, drawn by a connection he couldn't possibly understand, but felt with his whole heart. What Noah found in the small clearing would have made grown men run in terror. A massive brown bear, her belly swollen with cubs, lay trapped in cruel metal chains. A poacher's trap, set illegally and forgotten, had wrapped around her front paw. Blood matted her fur where the metal bit into flesh. The mother bear had been struggling for hours, growing weaker with each attempt to free herself. Her eyes, nearly closed with exhaustion, suddenly opened wide at the sight of the human child standing just feet away. The two locked eyes, a massive wild creature and a tiny human barely old enough to walk. In that moment, something passed between them that defied explanation. The mother bear stopped struggling and let out a soft whimper. Noah tilted his head, his innocent face showing nothing but concern for the animal's pain. Back at the cabin, Olivia suddenly realized the porch was empty. "Noah," she called, her heart beginning to race. "Noah!" Her eyes scanned the yard, then spotted the tiny footprints leading toward the forest. Pure terror seized her as she dropped the laundry and ran. In the clearing, Noah took another step toward the bear. The massive creature could have easily killed the child with one swipe of her free paw, but something in the baby's innocent approach kept her still. Noah stopped just inches from the chain. His small hand reached out, touching the cold metal that bound the bear's paw. Tears welled in his eyes as if he understood the animal's suffering. The mother bear made a sound, not a growl of warning, but a soft rumble that seemed almost like recognition. She looked from the child to her trapped paw and back again, intelligence showing in her dark eyes. Noah placed both hands on the chain, pulling with all his minimal strength, determined to help in a way that defied all logic and natural instinct. What happened next would change everyone who witnessed it forever. As Noah's small hands tugged at the chain, the mother bear watched with an almost human understanding in her eyes. The metal trap had a rusty latch that had snapped shut when she stepped into it. Noah's fingers, too small and weak to make any real difference, brushed against this latch as he pulled. Somehow, whether by chance or fate, his tiny index finger pushed through a gap in the mechanism, touching a pressure point that adults with their larger hands could never have reached. There was a soft click. The chain loosened just slightly, not enough to free the bear, but enough to relieve some of the pressure on her wounded paw. The mother bear's eyes widened, and she made another gentle sound, almost like encouragement. Noah, responding to this connection between them, pulled harder, his face scrunched with determination. Olivia crashed through the underbrush, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. When she broke into the clearing and saw her baby son inches away from a massive wild bear, a scream tore from her throat. "Noah!" The bear's head snapped up, her eyes now filled with fear at this new human presence. Noah, startled by his mother's scream, lost his balance and fell backward onto the forest floor. The sudden movement and noise shattered the delicate peace between child and beast. The mother bear reared up as much as her trapped position would allow, a warning growl rumbling from deep in her chest. Olivia froze, terrified to move forward, yet desperate to save her child. "Noah," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Baby, don't move." But Noah wasn't afraid. He looked up at his mother, then back at the bear, confusion on his face. Why were they both so scared? He had been helping. The toddler pushed himself back up to standing, his eyes never leaving the bear's face. "Noah, please," Olivia begged, taking one cautious step forward, then another. She was just 10 feet away now, close enough to lunge for her son if needed, but far enough that the bear might not see her as an immediate threat. What happened next defied everything Olivia knew about wild animals. The mother bear lowered herself back down and made a soft huffing sound toward Noah. The toddler, as if understanding perfectly, turned back to the chain and resumed his efforts on the latch. Olivia stood frozen in disbelief. Was her son actually trying to free a wild bear? And was the bear actually letting him? "Stay back," came a gruff voice from behind Olivia. She turned to see Jacob Turner, their nearest neighbor who lived 3 miles down the mountain. He held a hunting rifle pointed at the bear, his weather-beaten face hard with concentration. "I'll handle this." "No," Olivia whispered urgently. "Don't shoot, look at them." Jacob's finger hovered over the trigger as he took in the scene before him. His grizzled face registered shock, then disbelief. "I've been hunting these woods for 40 years, he murmured, "and I've never seen anything like this." The bear was now perfectly still, allowing Noah to work at the chain. The toddler's persistent fingers found the latch again, and this time, with all his might, he pushed. Years of forest weather had weakened the metal, and the trap's spring mechanism had been damaged during the bear's struggle. Noah's small hand provided just the right pressure in just the right spot. A louder click echoed in the clearing, followed by the clank of metal as the chain loosened further. The mother bear's paw was still caught, but the teeth of the trap had released their cruel bite. Blood flowed more freely from her wound as pressure released, but she remained calm, her eyes fixed on the small human who was causing this miraculous change. "We need to get him away from there," Jacob whispered, lowering his rifle slightly. "That bear's gonna bolt as soon as she's free, and she might take the boy with her." Olivia shook her head. "She won't hurt him. I don't know how I know, but she won't." A new sound filtered through the trees. Men's voices, several of them, approaching from the east side of the clearing. The mother bear's ears perked up, and fear returned to her eyes. Her body tensed, preparing to run as soon as she could free her paw. Poachers! Jacob spat the word like poison. They've been working these woods for months. Forest Service has been trying to catch them. He raised his rifle again, but this time pointed it toward the approaching voices. Noah, oblivious to this new danger, gave one final push on the trap's mechanism. With a groan of metal against metal, the trap opened wide enough for the mother bear to pull her injured paw free. She rose to her full height, massive and majestic despite her wound, and looked down at the tiny human who had saved her. For one heart-stopping moment, her face was inches from Noah's. The poachers broke through the tree line, 3 rough-looking men with guns and cruel faces. They stopped short at the tableau before them. A massive mother bear standing over a toddler, with a woman and an old man at the edge of the clearing. "What the hell?" the largest poacher exclaimed, raising his rifle. The mother bear roared, not at Noah, but at the men who threatened him. She positioned her massive body between the child and the poachers, her message clear. To get to the boy, they would have to go through her first. Jacob took aim at the poachers. "Drop your weapons or I drop you," he growled, his old voice carrying the weight of his threat. The standoff lasted only seconds but felt like hours. The large poacher's eyes darted from the bear to the child, to Jacob's rifle, calculating his odds. Finally, he lowered his weapon, signaling his companions to do the same. In that moment of distraction, the mother bear nudged Noah gently with her nose, pushing him toward Olivia. The toddler stumbled forward, giggling as if the bear was playing a game with him. Olivia rushed forward and scooped her son into her arms, tears streaming down her face. The mother bear gave one last look at the child who had freed her, then turned and limped quickly into the forest, disappearing among the trees. The poachers stood impotent, their plans foiled by the most unlikely alliance. But this wasn't the end of the story. As Jacob kept his rifle trained on the poachers until more help could arrive, no one noticed that the mother bear hadn't gone far. She watched from the shadows, her intelligent eyes never leaving the small human who had shown her kindness when she needed it most. 3 days later, as dawn broke over the forest, Olivia went to check the garden she had planted at the edge of their yard. What she found made her call out for Marcus in a shaking voice. There, arranged in a perfect circle on the ground, were 7 plump huckleberries, a bear's most prized forest treasure, and beside them a single perfect paw print pressed into the soft earth. Marcus came running at his wife's call, thinking something was wrong. When she showed him the berries and the paw print, he shook his head in amazement. "I've heard stories from the old indigenous people who first lived in these mountains," he said softly. "They believed bears were spiritual messengers, capable of forming bonds with humans who showed them respect." Olivia gathered the berries carefully, saving one to plant and carrying the rest inside. As she washed them in the kitchen sink, she looked out the window to see Noah sitting on the porch, staring into the forest with a smile on his face. He raised his small hand and waved, as if greeting an old friend. Deep in the forest, the mother bear had found a safe den to prepare for the arrival of her cubs. Her wounded paw was healing, and she had managed to hunt enough to keep herself strong. As she settled into her den, she carried with her the memory of small, gentle hands that had saved her when she had lost all hope. When her cubs were born weeks later, one of them, the smallest female, had unusual markings around her eyes that almost looked like tiny human fingerprints. The forest had many secrets, and now it held one more: the unbreakable bond between a wild mother bear and a human child who had somehow known exactly what to do when it mattered most. The story of Noah and the mother bear spread through the nearby town, then to neighboring communities. Many dismissed it as an exaggeration or a tall tale, but those who had been there, Jacob, Olivia, and Marcus, knew the truth. They had witnessed something miraculous, something that challenged everything they thought they understood about the divide between humans and wild animals. The poachers were arrested and faced severe penalties for illegal trapping and hunting in protected forests. Their capture led authorities to a larger operation, shutting down a ring of wildlife traffickers who had been decimating bear populations across 3 states. In an ironic twist, Noah's innocent act of compassion had done more to protect the forest's bears than years of law enforcement efforts. As for the mother bear, she was occasionally spotted in the distance, watching the edge of the Parkers' property. She never came too close, maintaining the respectful distance that wild creatures must keep from human dwellings. But sometimes, in the quiet hours of early morning, Olivia would find small forest gifts on their porch. A cluster of berries, an unusually shaped piece of bark, or once, a perfect honeycomb dripping with golden sweetness. The local wildlife officer, initially skeptical of the Parkers' story, became a believer when trail cameras captured images of the mother bear and her 3 cubs approaching the edge of the property, the smallest cub with the distinctive eye markings leading the way. The footage showed the bear carefully placing something on the ground before retreating into the forest. When the officer checked the spot later, he found a small pile of freshly dug medicinal roots, the exact kind that were known by indigenous healers to help with children's fevers. Noah had been fighting a cold that week. Science couldn't explain it. Logic rejected it. But heart recognized heart across the divide of species. A child too young to have learned fear had reached out to another mother in pain, and in doing so had forged a connection that defied understanding. Months turned to years, and Noah grew from a toddler to a young boy. His first clear memories were not of toys or playgrounds, but of dark eyes filled with intelligence and gratitude. When asked about the bear, he would simply smile and say, "She was my friend. She was scared, and I helped her." To him, it was that simple. On Noah's 5th birthday, the family held a small celebration in their backyard. As they gathered around the homemade cake Marcus had baked, a movement at the forest edge caught their attention. The mother bear stood there, her 3 cubs, now nearly grown, beside her. The smallest one, with the distinctive markings around her eyes, took a step forward, dropping something from her mouth before retreating back to her mother's side. After the bears disappeared into the forest, Marcus cautiously approached the spot. There, nestled in the grass, was a perfectly round stone, smooth and black, lined with a vein of quartz that caught the sunlight like a splash of stars. The stone became Noah's most treasured possession, a reminder that sometimes the most profound connections come from the simplest acts of kindness, even from the smallest hands. As Noah placed the stone on his windowsill that night, the mother bear and her cubs made their way deep into the forest, their mission complete. The debt had been acknowledged, the circle closed, but the bond remained, a silent thread connecting 2 mothers and their children across the divide between wild and tame, a reminder that compassion speaks a language that needs no words. And in the years that followed, whenever hikers reported seeing a bear with unusual markings around her eyes, locals would smile knowingly. "That's Noah's bear," they would say. "Best not to bother her. She's family." 7 years passed. Noah grew into a curious, compassionate 12-year-old with an uncanny understanding of animals that went beyond normal childhood affinity. The story of his encounter with the mother bear had faded into local legend, embellished with each retelling until even Noah sometimes wondered which parts were true memories and which were stories he'd been told. The forest had changed too. After the poaching ring was disbanded, the area had been designated as a wildlife sanctuary, with Marcus Parker, who had quit his accounting job to become a forest ranger, serving as its chief guardian. The family's small cabin had expanded into a modest wildlife rehabilitation center, where Olivia, now trained in veterinary assistance, helped injured animals recover before returning them to the wild. One autumn morning, as golden leaves carpeted the forest floor, Noah sat by the creek that ran through their property, sketching in a notebook. His talent for art had emerged early, and his drawings of wildlife captured not just their physical appearance but something deeper, a sense of their spirit, their essence. A twig snapped behind him. Noah turned, expecting to see one of his parents. Instead, he found himself looking at a young bear, nearly grown but not yet fully mature, with distinctive markings around her eyes that resembled fingerprints. He recognized her immediately as the smallest cub of the mother bear he had saved all those years ago. Noah remained perfectly still, his heart pounding, not with fear, but with excitement. "Hello," he whispered, using the gentle voice his mother had taught him to use with injured animals. The young bear made a soft huffing sound, her intelligent eyes studying him carefully. She stepped closer, and Noah noticed she was limping badly, favoring her right hind leg. Dark blood matted the fur there, and the wound looked fresh and deep. With slow, deliberate movements, Noah reached for his walkie-talkie to call his parents. "Mom, Dad," he said quietly, "I need help at the East Creek." "It's her, the cub with the markings. She's hurt." "Don't move," his father's voice crackled back. "We're coming." But the young bear was already moving closer, her eyes fixed on Noah with an expression that seemed almost like pleading. She stopped just a few feet away, lowered herself to the ground with obvious pain, and extended her injured leg toward him. "You want my help?" Noah murmured in amazement. "You came to find me." The young bear made another soft sound, laying her head on the forest floor. The wound on her leg was worse than Noah had initially thought, a deep gash that appeared to have been made by something metal, perhaps an illegal trap that had been missed in the cleanup operations. Noah reached slowly into his backpack and removed the small first aid kit he always carried. "I don't know if this will help much," he said softly, "but I can clean it at least." With gentle hands that belied his young age, Noah cleaned the wound as best he could with antiseptic wipes. The bear flinched but didn't pull away or show any aggression. It was as if she understood he was trying to help, just as he had helped her mother years before. Olivia and Marcus arrived minutes later, stopping short at the scene before them. Despite years of working with wildlife, they had never witnessed anything like this, their son tending to a wild bear that had deliberately sought him out. "Noah," Olivia whispered. "Back away slowly." Noah shook his head without looking up. "She came to me, Mom, she remembers." Marcus approached carefully, carrying a tranquilizer gun, standard equipment at their rehabilitation center. "Son, even if she does remember, she's injured and scared. That makes any wild animal dangerous." "She's not scared of me," Noah insisted. "Look at her eyes." The young bear's gaze remained fixed on Noah, showing none of the fear or aggression that would be expected. Instead, there was something like trust there. Trust that defied natural instinct. An hour later, the young bear lay sedated on an examination table in the rehabilitation center's medical room. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the wildlife veterinarian who worked with the Parkers, examined the wound carefully. "This was definitely caused by a trap," she confirmed, her face grim. "And it's not the first such injury I've seen this month. I think we have new poachers in the area." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I'll contact the Forest Service and the sheriff. We need to organize patrols." As Elena worked to repair the damage to the bear's leg, Noah sat nearby, watching with concern. "Will she be okay?" "With time and care, yes," Elena answered, smiling at the boy. "You did a good job cleaning the wound, Noah." That probably prevented infection from setting in. "She knew to come to me," Noah said quietly. "How did she know I could help her?" Elena glanced at Olivia, who shrugged slightly. The mystery of Noah's connection to these bears went beyond scientific explanation. "Sometimes animals sense things we don't understand," Elena offered. "Indigenous cultures have long believed in spiritual connections between certain humans and animals." Noah nodded, remembering the stories his father had shared about the native beliefs regarding bears as messengers. "We need to call her something while she's here. I think I'll call her Luna, because of the white crescent moon shape in her eye markings." As Noah spoke, Luna's mother was moving through the forest with purpose, following her injured daughter's scent trail. When she reached the edge of the Parker property, she stopped, standing on her hind legs to better see the rehabilitation center where her daughter had been taken. Though years had passed, she remembered this place, these humans. Instead of charging forward as most mother bears would do to reach their young, she sat at the forest edge, watching and waiting with unusual patience. Inside the center, Luna was beginning to wake from sedation. Elena had successfully cleaned, stitched, and bandaged her wound, and administered antibiotics to prevent infection. As the young bear's eyes fluttered open, they immediately sought and found Noah, who sat on a stool beside her. "Hey, Luna," he said softly. "You're going to be okay." What happened next astonished everyone in the room. Luna made a series of soft grunting sounds, almost like she was trying to communicate. Noah tilted his head, listening intently as if he understood. "I think she's trying to tell us something," he said slowly. "Something about her mother and others." Olivia and Marcus exchanged worried glances. Their son's connection with these bears was extraordinary, but this suggestion bordered on the impossible. "Noah, honey," Olivia began gently, "bears can't—" She was interrupted by an urgent knocking at the center's front door. Jacob Turner, now in his late 70s but still sharp-eyed and alert, stood there with his rifle in hand. "You'd better come see this," the old man said without preamble. "All of you." They followed Jacob outside to find an astonishing sight. At the edge of the forest stood Luna's mother, massive and dignified. Behind her were 5 other bears of varying ages and sizes, all standing unnaturally still, as if waiting. "I've been watching for an hour," Jacob said, his voice hushed with awe. "They led me here. I followed them because I noticed something strange." As he spoke, he pointed to each bear in turn. All of them had injuries, some fresh, some partially healed, consistent with traps or snares. "It's like they're seeking asylum," Marcus murmured in disbelief. Noah stepped forward, his young face set with determination. "They are. Luna was trying to tell us. The poachers are back and they're hurting lots of bears. Her mother brought the others here because she knows we can help them." For the next 2 weeks, the Parker Wildlife Rehabilitation Center operated beyond capacity. With emergency funding from the State Wildlife Department and volunteers from the community, they treated all 6 injured bears that had arrived with Luna's mother. Word spread about the extraordinary procession of bears seeking human help, drawing media attention from across the country. Wildlife experts and scientists came to observe the phenomenon, offering various explanations from learned behavior to unusual pack formation under threat. None could fully explain the apparent communication between the bears, or their specific choice to seek out Noah's family. Dr. Eliza Blackwood, a renowned expert in animal cognition from Cornell University, spent several days observing Noah with the bears. "There's something remarkable happening here," she told Olivia privately. "Your son appears to have what we might call interspecies empathy at an unprecedented level. The bears respond to him differently than to anyone else." While the scientists studied and theorized, Noah spent his days moving between the recovering bears, often sitting quietly with Luna or her mother, sometimes seeming to communicate through subtle gestures and expressions that even his parents couldn't interpret. One evening, as Noah sat beside Luna's recovery enclosure, the young bear made the same series of grunts and huffs she had made when first waking from sedation. This time, Noah's eyes widened. "Dad," he called urgently, "Luna keeps trying to tell me about a place. I think I know where the poachers are." Marcus was skeptical, but had learned not to dismiss his son's insights. Together with Sheriff Riggs and a team of Forest Service rangers, they followed Noah's directions to a remote section of the forest, nearly 10 miles from their property. There, hidden in a natural depression behind a rock formation, they discovered an illegal hunting camp with sophisticated equipment, including tranquilizer guns, surgical tools, and tracking devices. "This isn't ordinary poaching," Sheriff Riggs said grimly as they surveyed the site. "They're taking organs and tissue samples. This looks like black market medical research." The discovery led to a coordinated operation that spread across 3 states, eventually uncovering a network that harvested bear gallbladders and other organs for the international traditional medicine market. The organization had been using the bears essentially as living organ farms, tranquilizing them, taking what they wanted, and leaving the animals to recover enough to be harvested again later. As autumn turned to winter, the bears at the Parker Center recovered enough to be released back into the wild, all except Luna, whose leg injury would require several more months of rehabilitation. The day the other bears were released, including Luna's mother, was bittersweet. Noah stood with his parents at the release site deep in the protected forest, watching as the massive creatures lumbered away toward freedom. Luna's mother paused before disappearing into the trees. She turned back to look at Noah, their eyes meeting across the distance. The bear raised her snout, testing the air, then made a soft huffing sound that carried clearly to where they stood. "She says, 'Thank you,'" Noah whispered, tears in his eyes, "and that she'll come back for Luna when the snow melts." Olivia put her arm around her son's shoulders, no longer questioning his understanding. "I believe she will." Through the winter months, Luna became something of a celebrity. Under strict protocols established by Dr. Blackwood and the wildlife authorities, controlled studies were conducted on Luna's apparent ability to communicate with Noah. Researchers were astounded by their findings. Luna seemed to comprehend simple verbal commands from Noah, and in turn, her vocalizations demonstrated consistent patterns when referring to specific objects or situations. "It's not language as we understand it," Dr. Blackwood explained during a presentation at the center, "but it is certainly communication at a level we've never documented between humans and ursids before." Noah took all the attention in stride, more concerned with Luna's recovery than with scientific recognition. He spent hours each day with her, reading books aloud, talking about his school day, or simply sitting in companionable silence as he sketched in his notebook. Spring came early that year. As the last patches of snow melted from the forest floor, Noah woke one morning to find Luna unusually agitated in her enclosure, pacing and making the vocalizations he had come to recognize as excitement. "She knows," he told his parents at breakfast. "Her mother is coming today." Marcus and Olivia had learned to trust their son's unusual insights, But even they were startled when Jacob Turner called an hour later to report a large female bear waiting patiently at the normal release site, 5 miles into the protected forest. The family gathered Luna's medical records and release papers, already prepared for this day. As Noah helped guide Luna into the special transport crate, the young bear nuzzled his hand gently. "I'll miss you too," he whispered, pressing his forehead briefly against the crate's opening. "But you belong with your family." At the release site, they opened the crate door and stepped back. Luna emerged cautiously, her previously injured leg now strong enough to support her weight. She looked around, sniffing the air, then caught sight of her mother waiting at the forest edge. The reunion between mother and daughter bear brought tears to everyone's eyes. Even gruff old Jacob removed his hat and wiped his eyes as the two bears greeted each other with gentle huffs and touches. What happened next would be debated by scientists and wildlife experts for years to come. Luna turned from her mother and walked back to Noah, rising on her hind legs to stand before him, almost as tall as the 12-year-old boy. With deliberate gentleness, she placed her right paw, the one that had been injured, against Noah's chest, directly over his heart. Noah placed his hand over her paw, and for a moment they stood connected, boy and bear, in a gesture that transcended species. Then Luna dropped to all fours, returned to her mother, and together they disappeared into the forest. 1 year later, a research camera placed deep in the sanctuary captured remarkable footage. Luna and her mother, accompanied by 2 small cubs, one with the same distinctive eye markings as Luna. The bear family paused by the camera, almost as if posing before continuing on their way. When Noah, now 13, saw the footage, he smiled knowingly. "The little one with the markings," he said, "she'll be the next messenger." Dr. Blackwood, who had continued her studies at the Parker Center, asked, "Messenger for what, Noah?" The boy looked out the window toward the forest that had given him his purpose in life, for reminding humans that we're not as separate from other creatures as we think we are, that we can understand each other if we're brave enough to try. On Noah's 18th birthday, as he prepared to leave for college to study wildlife biology, he received an unusual package in the mail. It contained no return address, only a small wooden box and a note written in elegant handwriting, "For the boy who speaks with bears." Inside the box was an ancient carved stone amulet in the shape of a bear paw, along with a yellowed page torn from what appeared to be a journal dated 1879. The journal entry described a young indigenous boy who had saved a mother bear from a settler's trap and subsequently developed a lifelong bond with her and her descendants. "Some gifts," the note concluded, "are passed down through more than one kind of family." Noah wore the amulet the day he released his first rehabilitated bear as a fully qualified wildlife biologist. The young male bear paused before entering the forest, turning back to look at Noah with knowing eyes. Somewhere deep in the protected sanctuary, Luna, now a mother and grandmother many times over, raised her head as if sensing the connection continuing through yet another generation. The forest held many secrets, but perhaps the greatest was this: that the divide between human and wild was not as vast as most believed, that compassion could build bridges across the deepest chasms of difference, and that sometimes the smallest hands could forge the strongest bonds. In research centers and universities around the world, scientists continued to study what they now called the Noah Parker phenomenon, seeking to understand the neurological and behavioral foundations of his unique connection with bears. They published papers and conducted experiments, developed theories and argued hypotheses. But in the quiet moments at dawn, when Noah walked alone through the forest that had shaped his life, no scientific explanations were needed. He understood what had happened that day long ago, when a toddler had approached a desperate mother without fear. He had seen the world through innocent eyes, eyes that hadn't yet learned to divide the world into human and other, into safe and dangerous. And in that moment of pure connection between a human child and a wild mother, something ancient had been remembered rather than discovered. A truth that had been known by indigenous cultures for millennia but forgotten by modern society, that all life is connected, that compassion transcends species, and that sometimes the most profound understanding comes not from words but from the silent language of the heart. Now, as a grown man dedicated to protecting the creatures with whom he shared this fragile planet, Noah carried that lesson forward. And the bears, in their own way, carried it too. The story of the human baby and the pregnant mother bear had indeed put everyone who witnessed it in tears, but they were tears of recognition, of remembering what it means to be truly alive in a world of wondrous connection. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the forest seemed to hold its breath, Noah would take out his most treasured possession, the round black stone with its vein of quartz like a splash of stars, and remember the lesson he had learned from a mother bear and her cubs, that the greatest wisdom often comes from the most unexpected teachers, and that the language of love needs no translation. 20 years later, Noah Parker stood at the edge of a different forest, thousands of miles from the sanctuary where he had grown up. The Amazon rainforest stretched before him, its canopy a living ocean of green that seemed to breathe with ancient wisdom. At 41, Noah had become one of the world's foremost wildlife behaviorists, his work with cross-species communication earning him both acclaim and controversy in scientific circles. Dr. Parker, called Gabriela Santos, his Brazilian research partner, "The equipment is ready. We can begin when you are." Noah nodded, his eyes scanning the dense foliage. They had come to study the endangered, spectacled bears of the region, South America's only native bear species, but their true purpose ran deeper than mere observation. Reports had emerged of unprecedented bear behavior in this remote area. Spectacled bears appearing to guide lost human travelers to safety, bears bringing medicinal plants to injured indigenous children, bears seemingly protecting certain endangered plant species from human harvesting. "Do you really believe these bears are behaving like your North American friends?" Gabriela asked as they set up the final camera trap. Though she was a respected primatologist, she remained skeptical of Noah's more radical theories about animal consciousness and communication. "I don't believe anything yet," Noah replied with the careful precision of a scientist who had spent decades defending his unconventional research. "I observe, document, and look for patterns. That's all science ever is." But privately, Noah carried hope that what he had experienced with Luna and her family was not an isolated phenomenon, that perhaps across the world, in different species and ecosystems, similar connections between humans and animals were possible. His life's work had been building the case that animals possessed far greater emotional intelligence and communication abilities than mainstream science acknowledged. As night fell over their small research camp, Noah sat by the fire, his fingers instinctively finding the black stone he still carried everywhere. The firelight caught the quartz vein, making it glimmer like a distant constellation. "That stone must be very special to you," observed Maria Huayta, their indigenous guide. The elderly woman had watched Noah touch it numerous times throughout the day. "It was a gift," Noah explained, "from a bear family when I was very young." Instead of the skeptical look he usually received when sharing this story, Maria nodded knowingly. The Quechua people have stories of the ukuku, the bear, bringing stones of power to certain children who are meant to be bridge makers between worlds. Noah's hand stilled on the stone. Bridge makers? those who can speak to both human and animal spirits, Maria explained. They are rare, but when they appear, they come during times when the balance between worlds is threatened. Before Noah could ask more, a commotion erupted at the edge of camp. Jorge, one of their research assistants, burst through the underbrush, his face pale despite his tan. "You need to come," he said breathlessly. "All of you. They found something at the North Ridge site." The something turned out to be a clearing half a mile from camp where the forest floor had been meticulously arranged with fallen fruit, berries, and leaves in a pattern that could not possibly be natural. At the center of the arrangement lay a small, perfectly round stone, similar to Noah's, but with a vein of green instead of white. "This wasn't here yesterday," Jorge insisted. "We checked all the camera traps in this area." Noah knelt beside the arrangement, studying it carefully. "The cameras caught nothing?" "Nothing human," Gabriella confirmed, reviewing the footage on her tablet. "But look at this." She turned the screen toward Noah, showing footage from just after midnight. A female spectacled bear entered the clearing, carrying something carefully in her mouth. For over an hour, the bear methodically arranged the fruits and leaves, occasionally standing back as if to assess her work before continuing. "I've never seen this kind of deliberate arrangement behavior in ursids," Gabriella murmured. "This is more like what we see in corvids or primates." Maria leaned forward, her aged face illuminated by the tablet's glow. "She is making the symbol of Ukuku Rime." "Ukuku Rime," Noah repeated. "The bear's speech," Maria translated. "It is a very old sign from before the Spanish came. It means the bears wish to speak with someone they consider worthy." Under normal circumstances, Noah might have acknowledged this as interesting cultural context while focusing on scientific explanations. But 2 decades of extraordinary experiences with bears had taught him that sometimes indigenous wisdom held truths that science was only beginning to rediscover. "How do we respond?" he asked simply. The question caught everyone off guard, especially Gabriella, who had expected her senior colleague to dismiss the old woman's interpretation. Maria pointed to the stone at the center of the arrangement. "You must take the stone and leave your own in its place. Then wait." Noah felt the weight of his black stone in his pocket, his most treasured possession, the gift from Luna that had been with him through college, graduate school, and every research expedition since. The thought of parting with it sent a pang through his chest. "You don't have to do this," Gabriella said softly, noting his hesitation. "We can set up more cameras, observe for a pattern." "No," Noah interrupted, his decision made. "Science is about testing hypotheses, isn't it? Let's test this one." Before he could second-guess himself, Noah placed his precious black stone in the center of the arrangement and carefully picked up the green-veined one left by the bear. It felt warm in his palm, as if it had absorbed the day's sunlight despite being in the shaded clearing. "Now, what?" he asked Maria. "Now we wait," she replied. "But not here. The bear must be able to retrieve your stone without human presence." They retreated to camp, leaving only automated cameras to record what might happen. Noah found sleep elusive that night, his hand repeatedly reaching for the familiar shape of his stone, only to find the new one instead. It felt different, not just in its coloration but somehow in its essence, as if it carried a different kind of energy. At dawn, they returned to the clearing to find Noah's stone gone and the arrangement of fruits and leaves disturbed. Clearly, the bear had returned. But what they hadn't expected was the new addition, a clear trail of crushed vegetation leading deeper into the forest. "She's inviting us to follow," Noah said with certainty that surprised even him. Gabriella looked skeptical but curious. Or it's simply the path she took when leaving. No, Jorge interjected, examining the ground carefully. These marks were made deliberately. See how some branches are broken at regular intervals? This isn't natural movement. The team followed the trail for nearly 2 hours, venturing into a part of the forest that even Maria had never explored. The terrain grew increasingly difficult, with dense vegetation and treacherous ravines. Just as they were considering turning back, the trail led them to a hidden valley nestled between steep cliffs. What they saw there defied explanation. The valley floor was a mosaic of unusual vegetation, plants growing in patterns that suggested cultivation rather than wild growth. Medicinal herbs, rare fruits, and flowers grew in concentric circles around a central clearing, and in that clearing stood 7 spectacled bears of varying ages, arranged in a semicircle as if waiting for them. "Impossible," Gabriella whispered. "Spectacled bears are solitary. They don't form groups like this." Yet the evidence stood before them, a family group of bears that, by all scientific understanding, should not exist. The largest bear, clearly female and aging, stepped forward. A pattern of white fur around her eyes formed markings that made Noah's breath catch in his throat. Though the species was different, there was something in those markings that reminded him powerfully of Luna. "She's the matriarch," Maria whispered, "and she's very old for her kind." The old bear approached slowly, stopping about 10 feet from where the humans stood, frozen in amazement. She made a series of soft vocalizations, then gestured with her head toward the center of the clearing. There, half buried in the rich soil, Noah spotted something that sent a shock through his system, a corner of metal gleaming in the dappled sunlight, modern, human-made, and entirely out of place in this remote valley. "We need to see what that is," Noah said quietly. As if understanding, the matriarch bear stepped aside, clearing a path to the metal object. Noah approached cautiously, aware that he was surrounded by creatures that could easily kill him if they chose. When he reached the center, he knelt and began carefully digging around the metal. It was a data storage device, a hardened field drive of the type used by mining corporations for geological surveys. As Noah excavated it fully, he found it was connected to a small solar charging panel and a half-buried sensor array. "This is industrial survey equipment," Gabriella said, her scientific skepticism giving way to concern. "It's mapping the underground." Jorge examined the device more closely. "This belongs to Veritech Mining. They're not supposed to be surveying in protected areas." The implications hit Noah like a physical blow. Veritech was a multinational corporation that had been seeking lithium deposits throughout South America. If they had placed illegal survey equipment in this remote valley, it likely meant they had discovered something worth exploiting, something that would bring machinery and destruction to this hidden sanctuary. The matriarch bear made another series of vocalizations, more urgent this time. Noah found himself instinctively trying to interpret them, drawing on 20 years of studying bear communication patterns. "They know," he said slowly, looking around at the carefully cultivated plants. "Somehow, they understand that humans are planning to destroy this place. That's why they've been trying to communicate, to find humans who might help." "That's a massive leap, Noah," Gabriella cautioned, though her voice lacked its usual skeptical edge. "Is it?" he challenged. "Look at this valley. These plants aren't growing randomly. They're organized by medicinal properties. The Quechua people have used these same herbs for centuries. What if these bears have been maintaining this place? What if they've been watching humans long enough to understand what we value and what we destroy?" Maria nodded, unsurprised. The oldest stories say that when the first humans came to these forests, They learned which plants healed and which harmed, not from trial and error, but from watching what the bears ate when they were sick. The matriarch bear approached Noah again, this time coming close enough that he could feel her warm breath. She raised her right paw and placed it against his chest, directly over his heart, the exact same gesture Luna had made decades earlier when saying goodbye. In that moment, something clicked in Noah's mind, a connection so profound it felt like remembering rather than realizing. The green-veined stone in his pocket suddenly felt warm, almost vibrating with energy. When he removed it, the stone seemed to glow softly in the dappled light of the clearing. "They're the same family," he whispered, looking at the matriarch's intelligent eyes. "Not biologically, but spiritually. You're connected to Luna somehow." Gabriella opened her mouth to object to such an unscientific statement, then closed it again. What they were witnessing defied conventional scientific explanation. The matriarch bear made a series of sounds, then turned and lumbered toward a cave opening at the far side of the valley. She paused at the entrance, looking back as if expecting Noah to follow. "She wants to show me something," Noah said, already moving toward the cave. "Noah, this is madness," Gabriella protested. "You can't just follow a wild bear into a cave." But Noah was already moving, drawn by a certainty he couldn't explain. "Document everything," he called back to his team. "No matter what happens, make sure this valley and what these bears have created here is recorded and protected." The cave entrance was low, forcing Noah to duck as he entered. The matriarch bear waited just inside, where enough light filtered through to see. As his eyes adjusted to the dimness, Noah gasped. The cave walls were covered with markings. Not random scratches, but deliberate patterns that bore an uncanny resemblance to the petroglyphs created by ancient human cultures. Some depicted bears and humans standing together. Others showed plants with their roots clearly illustrated. And still others represented the sun, moon, and stars. But most astonishing were the newer marks. Fresher scratches that formed crude representations of excavation equipment, trucks, and the distinctive logo of Veritech Mining. "You've been watching them," Noah whispered, understanding flooding through him. "You've been monitoring their activities, trying to find a way to communicate the threat." The matriarch bear made a soft sound and moved deeper into the cave, where the light barely reached. Noah followed, using his phone's flashlight to illuminate the way. At the very back of the cave, in a small alcove, he found what the bear wanted him to see. A collection of artifacts, both ancient and modern, lay carefully arranged. Stone tools from indigenous peoples, fragments of modern plastics, pieces of scientific equipment, and at the center a worn leather journal with faded writing on its cover. Noah carefully picked up the journal, his hands trembling slightly. The name embossed on the cover was barely legible. Dr. Thomas Blackwood, Expedition Notes, 1952. Blackwood, the same surname as Doctor. Eliza Blackwood, who had studied Noah's connection with Luna decades ago. This couldn't be coincidence. Noah opened the journal to find a pressed flower marking a page near the middle. The entry was dated June 17, 1952. "I have made the most extraordinary discovery in this remote valley. The bears here have developed what can only be described as a proto-agricultural system, cultivating medicinal plants in distinct patterns. More remarkable still, they appear to be attempting communication with me through arranged objects and vocalizations unlike any I have documented in Ursids elsewhere. I am increasingly convinced that what the indigenous peoples have been telling me is true, that there exists a lineage of bears with heightened intelligence and a spiritual connection to humans that transcends our scientific understanding. If my theory is correct, These bears are somehow connected to the North American specimens I documented in my earlier work. The journal continued for several more pages, detailing Blackwood's observations and theories. The final entry was written in a shaky hand. I fear I have led danger to this sacred place. The company funding my expedition has shown too much interest in my reports of the valley's unusual mineral composition. I overheard their plans to begin mining operations once my survey is complete. I cannot allow this to happen. I have destroyed my official reports and will leave this journal with the bears who have shown me such trust. Perhaps someday someone worthy will find it and understand what must be protected here. The old Quechua woman called such a person Ukuku Rimachik, the one who speaks with bears. I pray such a person exists. Noah closed the journal, his mind reeling. Thomas Blackwood had discovered this valley and these bears 70 years ago, and now his granddaughter had unwittingly helped Noah find the same place. The journal had waited all this time, preserved by bears who somehow understood its importance, for someone who could bridge the worlds of human and animal understanding. The matriarch bear watched Noah intently, her intelligent eyes never leaving his face. I understand, Noah said quietly, and I will help. When Noah emerged from the cave, journal in hand, his research team was waiting anxiously. He showed them the journal and the mining company's survey equipment, explaining what he had discovered. This goes beyond our research now, he said firmly. This valley isn't just a habitat. It's a collaboratively maintained sanctuary, preserved by generations of bears with knowledge passed down through decades, possibly centuries. Even if that's true, Gabriella said, struggling to reconcile what she was seeing with her scientific training, how do we protect it? Veritech has powerful connections in the government. We document everything, Noah replied, a plan already forming in his mind. Every plant, every marking, every behavior. We prove that these bears have created something unprecedented, a non-human cultural heritage site that deserves protection under international law. And we contact Eliza Blackwood, he added, holding up the journal. Her grandfather discovered this place 70 years ago. She has the academic standing to help us make this case. Over the next 3 months, Noah and his team worked tirelessly, documenting the valley and its extraordinary bear inhabitants. They discovered that many of the plants being cultivated were rare species with significant medicinal properties, including 3 that were previously thought extinct. The bears' cultivation methods had preserved these plants while they disappeared elsewhere due to deforestation and climate change. More remarkably, as they gained the bears' trust, they observed behaviors never before documented in any bear species: deliberate teaching of younger bears by older ones, complex problem-solving, and most astonishingly what appeared to be a rudimentary form of symbolic communication through arranged objects and specific vocalizations. Dr. Eliza Blackwood, now in her 70s but still sharp-minded, flew to Brazil as soon as she received Noah's message. When she saw her grandfather's journal and the valley he had described, she wept. He spoke of this place when I was a child, she told Noah. No one believed him. They said the isolation had affected his mind. He died, still trying to convince the scientific community that what he had seen was real. Together, Noah and Eliza compiled their findings into a comprehensive report. Intergenerational Knowledge Transfer and Protocultural Behavior in Tremarctos ornatus. Evidence for Non-Human Cultural Heritage in the Amazon Basin. They submitted it simultaneously to major scientific journals and international conservation organizations, along with extensive video evidence and the survey equipment proving Veritech's illegal activities. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Conservation groups mobilized to secure emergency protected status for the valley. Viratech found itself facing international scrutiny and multiple lawsuits. Scientists from around the world clamored to visit and verify the extraordinary claims. But most significant was the indigenous response. Elders from multiple Amazonian tribes came forward with their own stories of bear-human communication, adding weight to Noah's findings with oral histories that stretched back centuries. What had been dismissed as a folklore was now being reevaluated as indigenous scientific knowledge preserved through story. 6 months after discovering the valley, Noah stood beside the Brazilian Minister of Environment as she signed a decree establishing the Ukuku-Rimai Sanctuary, the Valley of the Bear's Speech, as a protected indigenous and wildlife heritage site. Under the agreement, the valley would be jointly managed by a council of indigenous representatives and scientific advisors, with strict limitations on human presence. As the official ceremony concluded, Noah found himself alone at the edge of the valley. The matriarch bear appeared from the trees, approaching him without fear. She was moving more slowly now, her age more apparent than when they had first met. Noah knelt before her, holding out the green-veined stone she had given him. "I kept my promise," he said softly. The bear made a gentle huffing sound and extended her paw. Noah placed the stone in her open pad, and she closed her claws carefully around it. Then, to his surprise, she turned and called into the forest with a distinctive vocalization. From the trees emerged a young female bear, smaller but with the same distinctive eye markings as the matriarch. The older bear handed the stone to the younger one, who accepted it with what almost looked like reverence. Noah understood. Just as Luna's mother had passed her role to Luna, this matriarch was passing her responsibility to the next generation. The cycle would continue. The young bear approached Noah cautiously, studying him with intelligent eyes. After a moment, she extended her paw, offering the stone back to him. "You want me to keep it?" Noah asked, surprised. The young bear made a soft sound, pushing the stone toward him insistently. Noah accepted it with a nod of gratitude. "I understand. Our work isn't finished." As if confirming his words, the young bear turned and pointed toward the north with her snout, making a series of urgent vocalizations. "There are more places that need protection," Noah realized aloud. "More connections to be discovered." That night, by the campfire, Noah told Gabriela and the team what had happened. "I thought this was the culmination of my life's work," he said, looking at the green stone in his palm. "But it's just the beginning." Gabriela, who had started their expedition as the team's skeptic, nodded thoughtfully. "The bears have been trying to communicate with us for generations. Perhaps with other species as well. We've just been too arrogant to listen." "Not anymore," Noah replied with quiet determination. "Now we're listening." In the years that followed, Noah Parker's work expanded beyond the Amazon. Together with indigenous partners and open-minded scientists, he documented similar instances of cross-species communication and cooperation around the world. Elephants in Kenya, who guided humans to hidden water sources during droughts, cetaceans off the coast of Japan, who appeared to be cultivating specific seaweed beds, wolves in Siberia that seemed to patrol and protect certain ancient human archaeological sites. What had begun with a toddler's innocent act of compassion for a trapped mother bear had grown into a global movement, re-examining the relationship between humans and the other inhabitants of Earth. The old barriers between human and animal, between science and indigenous knowledge, between intellect and instinct, were gradually dissolving in favor of a more holistic understanding. On Noah's 65th birthday, he returned to the sanctuary where he had grown up, now expanded and ringed with protected forest for miles in every direction. As he sat on the porch of the old cabin, now a research center and education facility. He held both stones in his hands, the black one with its splash of stars that had started his journey, and the green one that had expanded it beyond anything he could have imagined. Movement at the forest edge caught his attention. A massive female bear emerged from the trees, accompanied by two half-grown cubs. Even at a distance, Noah could see the distinctive markings around her eyes, the same pattern that had marked Luna, now carried by what must be her great-great-granddaughter. The bear paused at the edge of the clearing, their eyes meeting across the distance. No words were needed, no explanations required. The connection remained, passed down through generations of bears and now shared with the world. Noah raised his hand in greeting, and the bear raised her paw in return, bridgemakers between worlds, guardians of a wisdom as ancient as life itself. Behind him, the door to the cabin opened. "Grandpa Noah," called a child's voice, "are you telling the bear's stories again?" Noah turned to smile at his 8-year-old granddaughter, Lucia, whose bright eyes held the same curiosity and compassion he had carried as a child. "No, sweetheart," he replied, holding out his hand to her. "They're telling stories to me." Noah turned to smile at his 8-year-old granddaughter, Lucia, whose bright eyes held the same curiosity and compassion he had carried as a child. "No, sweetheart," he replied, holding out his hand to her. "They're telling stories to me." Lucia joined him on the porch, following his gaze to the bears at the forest edge. To Noah's amazement, but not his surprise, the mother bear nudged her cubs forward, bringing them closer than a wild bear normally would with humans present. "They're beautiful," Lucia whispered, her small hand tightening around Noah's. "They are," he agreed. "Would you like to hear how I met their family many years ago?" As Noah began the story that had shaped his life, the story of a toddler and a trapped mother bear, Lucia listened with rapt attention. And at the forest edge, the bear and her cubs settled down to listen too, as if they somehow understood that their shared history was being passed to a new generation. The black stone with its splash of stars and the green stone from the Amazon rested side by side on Noah's knee, warm in the afternoon sun. Not just stones, but bridges between past and future, between species and worlds, between what humanity had been and what it might yet become. And in that moment, on a quiet porch at the edge of an ancient forest, the circle that had begun with a child's compassion for a suffering creature continued unbroken, echoing with the truth that had guided Noah Parker's remarkable life, that the language of the heart transcends all barriers, and that sometimes the smallest hands forge the strongest bonds between worlds. Years passed. Noah celebrated his 80th birthday surrounded by 3 generations of his family, colleagues from around the world, and the staff of the wildlife sanctuary he had helped build into an internationally recognized center for interspecies communication research. His once dark hair had turned silver, and his face bore the lines of a life lived outdoors, but his eyes remained bright with the same wonder that had guided him as a child. The celebration was held outdoors, under the ancient trees where a toddler had once approached a trapped mother bear without fear. As twilight fell and the party began to wind down, Noah slipped away from the gathering, drawn by an inexplicable pull toward the forest edge. "Where are you going, Grandpa?" Lucia, now a poised young woman of 23, and following in her grandfather's footsteps as a wildlife researcher, noticed his quiet departure. "I need a moment," Noah replied with a gentle smile. "I'll be back soon." Something in his tone made Lucia pause rather than follow. She watched as her grandfather walked slowly but purposefully toward the trees, his tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun. Noah felt it before he saw anything, a familiar presence, a connection that transcended ordinary senses. When he reached the first line of trees, he stopped and waited, knowing with absolute certainty that he was not alone. From the deepening shadows emerged a massive bear, her coat graying around the muzzle, but her movements still powerful and deliberate. Noah recognized the distinctive markings around her eyes instantly. This was the daughter of Luna's daughter's daughter, the current matriarch of the lineage that had been intertwined with his own for nearly 8 decades. "Hello, old friend," Noah said softly, his voice catching with emotion. The bear approached slowly, stopping just a few feet away. Her intelligent eyes studied him with what could only be described as recognition, not just of Noah as an individual, but of the bond that connected them across the generations. From his pocket, Noah withdrew both stones, the black one with its splash of stars that had been his first gift from the bears, and the green one from the Amazon that had expanded his understanding of their connection. He held them in his weathered palm, the last rays of sunlight catching their veins of quartz and making them glow with inner fire. The bear made a soft huffing sound, the same sound her ancestors had made decades earlier, and raised her right paw. With infinite gentleness, she placed it against Noah's chest, directly over his heart. The gesture, passed down through generations of bears, carried the same meaning it always had: recognition, gratitude, connection. Noah placed his free hand over her paw, completing the circuit between them. In that touch was everything. Every moment of understanding, every barrier crossed, every life saved, every sanctuary created around the world because one child had reached out to one bear in compassion. "We did good work together, didn't we?" Noah whispered, tears flowing freely down his lined face. The bear made another soft sound, almost like a sigh of agreement. Then, with deliberate care, she lowered her paw and nudged Noah's hand that held the 2 stones. Understanding her intent, Noah knelt slowly, his old knees protesting but his heart certain, and placed both stones on the forest floor between them. From around her neck, the bear removed something Noah hadn't noticed before, a small leather pouch suspended on a cord of woven plant fibers. Using her teeth and claws with surprising dexterity, she opened the pouch and emptied its contents beside Noah's stones. 2 more stones rolled out, one white with a vein of blue that caught the fading light like a river, and one amber-colored with inclusions that resembled tiny leaves. 4 stones now lay between them, each representing a chapter in their shared journey across continents and decades. "You've been collecting them too," Noah realized aloud, wonder filling his voice. From the edge of the clearing came Lucia's voice, soft with awe. "Grandpa? What's happening?" Noah didn't turn, keeping his eyes on the bear. "Come slowly, Lucia. There's someone you should meet." With the natural caution of a wildlife researcher, Lucia approached, stopping when she saw the massive bear standing before her grandfather. But there was no fear in her gasp, only wonder and recognition. "Is that?" "Yes," Noah confirmed. "This is the daughter of Luna's lineage. She's been waiting." The bear's gaze shifted to Lucia, studying her with the same intelligence that had marked her ancestors. After a moment, she turned back to the 4 stones lying on the ground between them. With careful movements, she separated them, nudging Noah's black stone and the white and blue stone toward Lucia, while moving the green stone and amber stone toward Noah. Lucia knelt beside her grandfather, understanding dawning in her eyes. "She's passing them on," she whispered, "2 for each of us." Noah nodded, emotion too powerful for words closing his throat. After all these years, after all the scientific papers and international recognitions, the most profound truth remained the simplest: that across the divide of species, hearts could recognize each other. and wisdom could be passed from generation to generation. The bear made a series of soft vocalizations, not directed at Noah this time, but at Lucia. The young woman's eyes widened in surprise, then softened with understanding. Though she had studied bear vocalizations for years, this was different. This was direct communication that went beyond science. "I understand," Lucia said softly. "I'll continue the work." The bear huffed once more, then rose to her full height. For a moment, she stood silhouetted against the darkening sky, magnificent and wild, yet connected to the humans before her by bonds stronger than blood. Then, with a final glance at Noah, a glance that held everything that needed to be said between old friends, she turned and disappeared into the forest. Noah gathered the 2 stones the bear had indicated were his to keep, the green one from the Amazon, and the new amber one with its leaf-like inclusions. Lucia carefully picked up the black stone with its splash of stars and the white-blue stone like a flowing river. "Why did she give us these?" Lucia asked, examining the stones in her palm. Noah looked at his granddaughter, seeing in her the same compassion and curiosity that had led him to approach a trapped bear nearly 80 years ago. "Because some journeys are ending," he said gently, "and others are just beginning." That night, as the family settled into the main lodge of the sanctuary, Noah sat before the fire, the 2 stones warm in his hand. He had given his life to understanding the connection between humans and animals, to building bridges across the divides that separated species. The work had often been challenging, frequently doubted, occasionally ridiculed, but it had changed the world in ways even he was only beginning to fully comprehend. Throughout the night, as the celebration continued around him, Noah found himself remembering not just the extraordinary moments with bears across continents, but the ordinary moments that had defined his life's purpose. The look in a child's eyes when they first understood that animals had emotions too. The transformation in a skeptical colleague when they witnessed cross-species communication firsthand. The gradual shift in humanity's relationship with the natural world as the old barriers of assumed superiority began to crumble. As midnight approached, Noah felt a strange weariness settle over him. Not unpleasant, but insistent. "Hey," he said his good nights, embracing family members and accepting their happy wishes with a smile that held both joy and something deeper. In his room, he placed the green and amber stones on his bedside table, where moonlight streaming through the window made them glow with inner light. He dreamed that night, vivid, powerful dreams of forests he had visited, and some he had not, of bears he had known, and many he hadn't. In his dreams, he ran with them, free from the constraints of his aging human body, communication flowing between them as naturally as breathing. He saw Luna again, young and strong, and her mother, and all the bears whose lives had intersected with his across the decades. They moved together through landscapes both familiar and strange, not as separate species but as kindred spirits sharing the same world. When Lucia came to wake her grandfather for breakfast the next morning, she found him peaceful in his bed, a small smile on his lips, one hand curled around the green and amber stones. The greatest bridge builder between worlds had crossed his final bridge during the night, guided by the bears who had shaped his extraordinary life. The news spread quickly beyond the sanctuary. First to the scientific community where Noah Parker's work had transformed understanding of animal cognition and communication, then to the indigenous communities with whom he had partnered to protect sacred animal habitats around the world, and finally to the general public who had been captivated by the man who could speak with bears. Messages of condolence and gratitude poured in from every continent, from scientists and shamans alike, from world leaders and schoolchildren who had grown up reading Noah's books about his animal friends. But perhaps the most powerful response came from the forests themselves. On the day of Noah's memorial service, a simple outdoor gathering at the edge of the forest he had loved, researchers at bear sanctuaries across 6 continents reported extraordinary behavior. In North America, Asia, South America, and Europe, bears approached the boundaries of protected areas and sat in silent vigil, some bringing stones or arrangements of plants. Trail cameras captured images of bears sitting in circles in remote valleys, as if in their own ceremony of remembrance. Scientists who had been skeptical of Noah's more radical theories found themselves without explanation for this synchronized global behavior among isolated populations. Those who had worked with him nodded in quiet understanding. The connections he had helped forge went deeper than human science had yet fully comprehended. At the sanctuary, as Lucia delivered a moving tribute to her grandfather, a line of bears emerged from the forest, nearly 30 of them, led by the aging matriarch with the distinctive eye markings. Instead of fear or panic, a hushed awe fell over the gathered mourners as the bears arranged themselves at the forest edge, silent witnesses to the celebration of Noah Parker's life. "They've come to say goodbye," Lucia said, her voice breaking with emotion but strong with purpose, "and to remind us that the work continues." The matriarch bear stepped forward from the line, carrying something carefully in her mouth. She approached the simple wooden podium where family members had placed mementos of Noah's life, and, with deliberate gentleness, set down her offering. A perfect circle of stones, each with a different colored vein running through it, arranged around a cluster of healing herbs from the forest. As she stepped back, a shaft of sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the circle of stones until they seemed to glow from within. Black with stars, green from the Amazon, white-blue like a river, amber with leaves, and others from forests around the world. Together they formed a map of the journey Noah and the bears had taken together, a journey that had changed how humanity saw its place in the web of life on Earth. Lucia stepped forward, the black and white blue stones warm in her hand, and placed them in the circle, completing the pattern the matriarch had begun. Their eyes met across the small distance, human and bear, the next generation of bridge builders, and in that moment, everyone present felt the truth that had guided Noah Parker's remarkable life, that the boundaries between species were far more permeable than humanity had believed, that communication flowed in many directions if one only learned to listen, and that compassion was the universal language that connected all living things. As the bears retreated silently into the forest, one by one, the matriarch remained the longest, her gaze sweeping over the gathered humans one final time, before she too disappeared among the trees. But those who looked closely noticed that she left one path clearly marked, a trail leading from where Noah's journey had ended to where future explorations would begin. In the years that followed, Lucia Parker expanded her grandfather's work in ways even he might not have imagined, developing technologies that helped translate animal vocalizations and behavior patterns into forms humans could better understand. The stones remained at the center of the sanctuary Noah had built, a reminder of the connections that transcended species and continued beyond individual lifetimes. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, visitors to the sanctuary would glimpse bears emerging from the forest, approaching the circle of stones with offerings of their own, berries, specially arranged leaves, or occasionally new stones with their own unique patterns. The language between species continued to evolve, the conversation Noah had helped start flowing onward like a river finding its way to the sea. For in the end, what Noah Parker had discovered was not just that animals could communicate, but that the world itself was a living conversation, spoken in countless languages of which human speech was just one. And the most important message, carried by bears across generations, was perhaps the simplest of all, that a single act of compassion could ripple outward through time, building bridges where barriers once stood, and reminding all living things of their shared place in the great web of life. As Lucia often told the children who visited the sanctuary, showing them the black stone with its splash of stars that had started it all, remember, it began with the smallest hands reaching out to help. Never underestimate what your compassion can do. It might just change the world. And somewhere in the forest, bears carried the same story in their own way, teaching each new generation about the human child who had once freed a mother in desperate need, and in doing so, had freed something much larger. The possibility of a world where species remembered how to speak to one another again, not as strangers, but as family sharing a common home.